You decide your student days will be best spent hollering against the state of Israel because you can accuse them of all the things you've been told you're guilty of. This is projection on a massive scale, but the evil that it reveals is extraordinary. I give an example in the book of, I give many examples, but one of the ones that really shattered me was that when the Nova Party, which as people will know was one of the targets that Hamas came upon that morning, October the 7th, 2023, when the Nova Party was memorialized, it was an exhibition you probably saw. I saw it in Tel Aviv when it started, but it was a memorial exhibition and a sort of recreation of what happened, testimony, and the exhibition traveled to Los Angeles and also here to New York, not far from where we're sitting at the moment. And when this exhibition opened, it was greeted by hundreds of protesters, who, some of whom on the way, you'll remember, covered their faces in kafirs and COVID masks because, as I can never resist saying, these people are simultaneously hot for intifada and fearful of the COVID-19 virus. Wildly worried about the Delta variant, I'm sure we can agree. But these cowards, the new KKK, they cover their faces just like this. They're cowards. These people are on the New York subway chanting, asking for any Zionists to identify themselves and get off the train. What level of evil do you have to have fallen into that you would think?
The West is rotting from within. Ivy League students, cosplaying Hamas, scream about stolen land to launder their own historical guilt. Sadism becomes activism as they harass grieving families, cheering for death cults. This isn't protest, it's ceremonial self-loathing fueled by foreign propaganda. When a civilization's own children are trained as its executioners, its survival is not guaranteed. Join Douglas Murray in this eye-opening debate.
Enemies said you might be. This shouldn't be that difficult. And I intervened on that episode on Rogan because I just felt I had to. And I'm glad I did, but I'm sorry that some people have willfully or otherwise decided to completely misrepresent what I was saying. But as you know, Barry, one of the things about being in the public square is that not only do you have to forge your words for people to understand them clearly, you also have to forge them in such a way that a malevolent actor will not deliberately misrepresent them.
Not possible. Okay, I want to talk about your book. And I think the way maybe to set the scene here is we're living in a moment, Douglas, where we have a cultural right, let's not say the right, but an increasing group with increasing power on the cultural right that is, revising whether or not Churchill was a good or a bad guy, revising whether or not the Holocaust was as evil and as bad as we remember, while at the same time we have a very powerful movement and a chic movement on the left that is calling to globalize the Intifada. That, just at Yale a few nights ago, students in Hamas headbands were chanting, father, son, mother, daughter, we will honor all our martyrs, while harassing Jewish students. This was at Yale, not yet one of Trump's targets. Before we get to the book, I want you to just diagnose for me where we are. There's a understanding that anti-Semitism, rising anti-Semitism, the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism is a sign that a society is in very dire straits. Is that what you see here in America or in the West? And if not, what is the reason that these ideological movements seem to be gaining such power at the moment?
It's slightly like where we start off. I'm wary of it because I'm wary of over-diagnosing and of under-diagnosing.
Mm-hmm.
Murray's warning cuts sharp. The right risks playing dress-up with Hitler, while the left cosplays Hamas on Ivy League lawns. Yale students chanting, "We honor all martyrs" in Hamas headbands. This isn't protest, it's a death cult chic. Anti-Semitism always signals rot. In 1930s Germany, it marked collapse. Today, it stalks the West. Democracy or barbarism? Which side do you think chanting for jihad belongs to?
I never like I've spent the last year and a half covering the actual war in the Middle East. As you know, I mean, the book is really about three things. One is what happened on October the 7th and the testimonies I get from survivors and families and others. The second is that I wanted to see and chronicle Israel's military response and societal response up close. And the third thing really in the book is to ask why in this fight between what I call a democracy and a death cult, between the nation of Israel and the death cults of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian Revolutionary Government, who literally worship death, love death, seek death for others and for themselves. Why would so many people find it so hard to know which side to be on? And I spent a lot of time thinking about that because it's haunted me ever since I saw the first bits of footage coming out of Israel of the Hamas terrorists killing people with such ecstasy, high, orgiastically violent. And, you know, it would be equivalent to if in the 40s the Nazis had broadcast from Bergen-Belsen to the world, boasting, and then anyone in the world saying, no, didn't happen, or, well, it may have happened, but there's some reasons, and so on. These guys broadcast to the world what they were doing. So why did so much of the elite world, and some other bits as well, you know, but why did so much of the elite world go onto the side of the death cults? I'm concerned about not getting this question wrong because, on the one hand, talking about Ivy League campuses is so damn rarefied. What do these places mean?
Fire in the room. October 7th massacre. About 1,200 murdered and 250 kidnapped. Rips the veil off moral cowardice. Murray shouts, choose life, not death. He's right. Democracies defend citizens. Death cults celebrate annihilation. Western elites apologizing for monsters is insanity. Gaza's ensuing campaign has cost tens of thousands of Palestinian lives and shattered cities. Call out hypocrisy now? Who still pretends both sides are equal?
Our elite institutions have gone rotten. You and I could have told anyone that at any time in our adult lifetimes. But so I don't want to exaggerate it because a lot of just ordinary Americans on the streets don't want this shit.
No, but there's a recent.
Am I allowed to say shit?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
But there's a recent poll of young Americans, and an astonishingly high number identify with Hamas. This is not a survey of Harvard undergrads. It's young Americans getting their information from TikTok and Hassan Piker on Twitch and who knows what else. So I do think that is real, and the kind of inoculation perhaps that was granted to a generation above us that, you know, I guess the Shoah inadvertently provided, that inoculation is gone. It's gone.
I think it's not just that has gone. I think that there's something very important psychologically, which if I can say so, which I identify in the book, which is, in the book before this, The War in the West, I talked at some length about the anti-Americanism and anti-Westernism that existed in America in particular. And what I said there was that there was a very dangerous thing being set up in the United States and in other Western countries, which was that young people born in the 21st century were being told that they were guilty of things that they could not possibly, conceivably be said to have guilt for. You know, you are guilty if you are born in America in the 21st century of slavery, genocide, ethnic cleansing, white supremacy, and so on. These are all charges you can take on their own, and they have more and less legitimacy wherever you want to look in the American past, as in any country's past. But to say to people, you are guilty, with no form of alleviation of the guilt, was, as I said in The War in the West, an extremely dangerous trap to put people into. I lent on Hannah Arendt's...
Rotten elites, poisoned campuses, and now a poll shows shocking numbers of young Americans sympathize with Hamas. Why? TikTok propaganda, Twitch rants, and a culture that teaches kids they're born guilty of crimes centuries old. Instead of resilience, they inherit shame. When guilt replaces pride, anti-Americanism festers. If the Holocaust was once an inoculation, that vaccine is gone. So tell me, who's brainwashing your kids?
Philosophy in this, about not setting up a system of guilt with no possibility of forgiveness. And I said in The War in the West, I didn't know exactly how it was going to manifest. I could see it manifesting in the Western anti-Westernism and the American anti-Americanism. The one thing you can be sure of, as Alan Bloom said in the 1980s, one thing you could be sure of was not just that a student at an American elite university would think that all truth was relative, but by the 2020s that all of the problems of the world were our fault. Now, as I see it, much of the reaction of the student groups and so on, first of all, it's all imported in one way or another.
Well, the ideas are Soviet.
There's that. There's also the fact that honor our martyrs. Come on. This is imported crap. This is Qatari-funded, Qatari-influenced, Iranian-influenced import ideology. This is not a generic ideology that happened to crop up at Yale.
But I want to push back on that because I do think that's a little bit of a cope. Like, we have a huge story in the Free Press today about the $29 billion from foreign governments, including Qatar and China, that have flowed into elite universities. And if you're looking to invest and pour fuel on a fire of anti-Americanism, you can do no better than the Ivy League. But let's not delude ourselves into thinking that—
I'm by no means pretending that that's the only cause. I'm saying that once something is pushed like this, once a kerosene like this is pushed by a foreign power into a highly receptive environment, something happens. And I'll just quickly explain what it is that's happened. What has happened in the last 18 months, and not just on the campuses, at Grand Union Station here in New York the other night, where pro-Hamas protesters shut the station down again.
Students chanting "Honor our martyrs" while sipping Starbucks in Manhattan isn't grassroots rebellion, it's imported ideology, greased by $29 billion in Qatari and Chinese cash funneled into elite universities. Murray nails it. Guilt with no forgiveness breeds self-hatred, and foreign powers exploit it like pouring kerosene on dry wood. Soviet relativism, Iranian propaganda, TikTok brain rot. Why are America's brightest parroting Tehran instead of Jefferson?
What they're doing is what a psychologist would call projection. They are accusing the state of Israel of all of the things that they have been taught that they themselves are guilty of. They have been told that by dint of being in America in the 21st century, you are on stolen land. What do you do about it? Do any of the kids or their professors in question want to hand over the ground of UCLA to a tribe that has died out? And they don't. They could. They don't. But what can you do, I wonder? It turns out that you can accuse the one Jewish state in the world of all of the crimes that you have been told you are guilty of by dint of being born in the West. Why does this stuff work so well in specific countries? It works so well in America, so well in Australia, so well in Canada, so well in Britain, in the Anglosphere, effectively. Because all of these countries have been prepared for this in recent years. They have all been prepared, knowingly or otherwise, for just such a moment of scapegoatism, just such a moment where you can say all of my sins, all of the things that I've been, like the Scientologists, with the particles they believe that you get from some
This is how they go. This is how you go clear.
This is how you go clear. This is how you decide your student days will be best spent hollering against the state of Israel because you can accuse them of all the things you've been told you're guilty of. This is projection on a massive scale, but the evil that it reveals is extraordinary. I give an example in the book of, I give many examples, but one of the ones that really shattered me was that when the Nova Party...
Murray's dead on. This is projection theatre. Kids marinated in stolen land guilt at UCLA scream at Israel instead of handing over dorms to vanished tribes. Why? Because scapegoating is easier than sacrifice. The Anglosphere's been prepped for it. America, Canada, Britain, Australia, all steeped in ritual self-flagellation. Like Scientologists going clear, these activists think they purge sins by chanting "Free Palestine."
Which, as people will know, was one of the the targets that Hamas came upon that morning, October the 7th, 2023, when the Nova Party was memorialized, it was an exhibition you probably saw. I saw it in Tel Aviv when it started, but it was a memorial exhibition and a sort of recreation of what happened, testimony, and the exhibition traveled to Los Angeles and also here to New York, not far from where we're sitting at the moment. And when this exhibition opened, it was greeted by hundreds of protesters, who, some of whom on the way, you'll remember, covered their faces in kafirs and COVID masks because, as I can never resist saying, these people are simultaneously hot for intifada and fearful of the COVID-19 virus, wildly worried about the Delta variant. I'm sure we can agree. But these cowards, the new KKK, they cover their faces just like this. They're cowards. These people are on the New York subway chanting, asking for any Zionists to identify themselves and get off the train. They get to the center of New York and they go to the Nova exhibition and they stand outside and they chant support for Hamas, support for Intifada, support for the murder of people at the Nova Party, claim that the Nova Party itself was guilty and a legitimate target. One of the men walking through the street of New York that day to the exhibition was a father who lost his daughters at the party. He had to walk in New York past a crowd of hundreds of people with a stage and megaphones celebrating the murder of his children.
Picture this, a grieving father in New York, walking to a memorial for his daughters butchered at Nova, forced to march past a mob cheering their deaths. Protesters masked like bargain bin jihadist KKK cosplay, screaming for intifada on American soil. That's not free speech. That's sadism disguised as activism. When victims can't mourn without hecklers exalting killers, tell me, what kind of society tolerates that filth?
What level of evil do you have to have fallen into that you would think that you would stand outside a memorial to the young people killed at that party and say that the young people dancing in the early hours were guilty and deserved the slaughter and the rape and the murder and the beheading and the kidnapping? This is not a problem for Israel. And I've said this since October the 8th. This is not a problem for Israel. Israel has an army, and it has a civilian army, and it has the right to make its own decisions about how it protects itself. But this is a profound problem for America and the rest of the West, that we have people in our midst who glorify in the death cults, who find it easy to decide. Some people find it difficult to decide whether they're on the side of Israel or Hamas. I don't. I know which side I'm on. I know which side I want to thrive and to win. And I know which side I want to be over, in order that the Israelis can live in peace and the Palestinians can live in peace. Hamas is a disaster for Israel, but it's an even bigger disaster for the Palestinians. But that aside, why do so many people find it so easy to be on the side of the death cult of Hamas? And why do so many of them, not sure which side I'm on here, the same people who said for years believe all women, they don't believe Israeli women when they're raped. They simultaneously deny that women were raped on the 7th of October and claim that the IDF, when they go into Gaza, can't help but rape women. Once again, projection. You claim that Israel is doing things your own side is doing.
What?
They accuse the Israelis of being baby killers.
I see everything you've...
They support the baby killers. They literally love the baby killers.
But how is it simply that people, that evil is real? And
yes.
That evil, of course evil's real.
Yes.
But give us your best explanation of the unexplainable. How can it be that so many people...
Evil doesn't just crawl in wearing horns. It marches with megaphones outside memorials, chanting that raped and butchered kids deserved it. Israel can defend itself, but America's rot runs deeper. Our own citizens cheer for death cults while pretending nuance. The same crowd that screamed believe all women suddenly gaslights raped Israeli women. Projection everywhere accuse Israel of baby killing while worshipping the butchers of babies.
who've been educated at the most storied institutions in American life are falling prey to this. And maybe put another way, and you write about this in the book. And as I read it, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I didn't think about it this way. There's been so many protests since October 7th, 2023. And what you write about and point out is that there was no mass protest in this country against Hamas.
No.
Now, I'm an optimist. I believe that the vast majority of ordinary Americans understand which side is overwhelmingly on the side of good and which is on the side of evil in this conflict. But explain that to us. How have the most vocal, passionate people been on the side of evil, and where are the voices in this country and perhaps in the West more broadly on the side of the good?
Well, there are a lot of people on the side of the good. A lot of good people with a voice, and some without, many without. I have no instinctive sort of optimism or sort of Panglossianism, nor pessimism or depression about any of this. I simply look at the situation as it is. I would just say that there are a couple of historical examples I give in the book, which I'm really, really keen that people absorb, which are relatively little known. But the aim of them, from previous outbursts of anti-Israelism, anti-Semitism, anti-Jewishness, and so on, one of the things I'm very keen to point out in a couple of the stories and anecdotes I tell, historical comparisons I make, is to enliven people to recognize the idea that sometimes you can become precisely the thing you meant not to become. Sometimes in the name, everybody used to know this, sometimes in order to do the worst evil, you have to think you're doing the greatest good.
Elite grads with six-figure degrees chanting for Hamas isn't complexity, it's moral bankruptcy. Murray's right. Notice the silence. No marches against Hamas, only parades excusing them. History screams this pattern. People convinced they're fighting for justice become the monsters they claim to hate. The Nazis thought they were saving civilization. Today's campus radicals think they're decolonizing. Different costumes, same sickness. When will the West learn that self-righteousness breeds barbarism?
Sometimes you'll find yourself thinking, for instance, I'm an anti-Nazi. I'm an anti-Nazi. I'm sure I'm an anti-Nazi. I've always been anti-Nazi. I don't like the people. And then you're on the side of Hamas because of reasons I give in the book. The truth is, as I say at one point in the book, that our age is very loath to use the theological language of evil. But it's become my certain belief in the last couple of years that we have to be able to use this term because some things deserve it. And the actions of Hamas absolutely deserve it. Not just their treatment of the Israelis on October the 7th and since, and their treatment of the kidnappees, but the treatment of people in their own society they claim to govern. If evil exists as a force in the world, as I believe it does, then it must be countered judiciously, carefully, always, as I believe I've seen with the IDF, always in the knowledge that what you are doing must be in defense of a society and not motivated by a hatred. But it must be comprehensively destroyed. And I have little truck with people who say that Hamas alone of all human ideologies is indestructible. Without needing to cite the Nazis, I would just say, look at the cult of the emperor in Japan up until 1945. We thought it could never be destroyed. It was far more powerful than Hamas. Far more powerful. And this country, America, which so many people on the left and now on the right want to disparage, they pretend that they did no good in the world. This country, America, among its many great achievements, saw off the death cult of the Japanese emperor by military defeat and by moral victory.
Projection turns guilt into genocidal cheerleading. Memorials become battlegrounds for sadists. Western universities export moral self-harm and import propaganda. Can a civilization survive when its guardians train as its executioners? Wake up, call out the hypocrisy, and choose life over ceremonial self-loathing before it's too late. So, any thoughts on what Douglas Murray just discussed? Share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss any of our future debates.